everybody, and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. I have a chart that has perfectly predicted every single top and bottom of Bitcoin cycle over the last 10 years. This is such an important time in our current cycle because we have institutional investors, we have on-ramps like we've never had before, and now we are about to see a retail wave that's going to drive the prices of crypto to levels we've just never thought possible. I firmly believe that anybody positioned and prepared to capitalize on this coming bull run will make the majority of their profit, and this is the one bull run where as long as we have our positions ready to go, we have the opportunity of making not only 5 and 6 figures, but 7 and 8 figures with even small amounts of investments. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you do find any value in this video, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. And if you want to see anything I'm investing in long term, links are in the description. Go ahead and sign up on my website. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And with that being said, let's jump right into this amazing video today. Hello everybody, and welcome back once again for another video. We're going to be jumping straight into what I think is going to be super valuable for understanding the long term of Bitcoin. We're going to be taking a look at every single Bitcoin cycle. I'm going to be sharing with you guys a pattern here that I think is super vital because it really has dictated our cycle tops as well as our cycle bottoms. And I think it's very important that if you understand this, you're going to understand how to actually take profits coming at the end of this cycle. Now, right off the bat, when we're looking at this, guys, we can see that in the entire price history of Bitcoin cycles, we've been consolidating inside of this channel. We have a high and we have a low, and we've just been ping-ponging back and forth inside of that declining channel. It makes sense that the channel is declining because as more adoption takes place in Bitcoin, as there's more money and volume, the price begins to stabilize. I think it's very important that you're starting from the very beginning and you're looking at how this thing is played out. Now, what we've noticed here is at every single time we've hit the top of this channel, it has produced a bear market. This has marked the local tops as well as the cycle tops of our cycles. We can see that we started this pattern in 2011, peaking in the RSI at 99. Obviously, there was a lot more volatility at the time, and that was where we saw the beginning of that bear market. Once we came back down and retested the low end of this support, this is really where that pattern starts to play out. Now, every single cycle, what you're going to notice, we have the all-time high, right? That was where we went through all of our prior consolidation, and we're basically just making these 90, 80, 90% pullbacks, making the first higher highs and higher lows. But what we notice here is once the RSI actually bottoms off of the low end support of this channel, we usually make our first breakout come somewhere in between the mid-range of the cycle top and the cycle low on the RSI. And we make some type of consolidation there. And generally, this has been the consolidation, or what I should say, the final consolidation before we get that breakout into price discovery. And this is the case every single one of these cycles. Now, one of the interesting things about this pattern is you're going to notice that sometimes we can actually hit the top of this resistance 2 different times. In 2011 and 2012, we first started breaking out and we made our new all-time high right here. And we can see that the RSI actually tagged this resistance. And then we made a correction and we ended up getting one more final high after that. And this was also just a retest of that same range, right? And so there is periods of time where the market can get overextended, and we can actually see that we end up tagging this level 2 different times. Now that takes us to our bear market, cycle top, and we see a lot of the same events. Now, in the same way that we can see that the RSI tags the upper resistance, we can also see that it happens on the lower end as well. In 2015, when we saw this double bottom formation, we saw 2 big capitulation events. Neither of them broke down from support, but it was a big Wyckoff accumulation that took place over a course of 280 days approximately. We got 2 different retests off of that level, right on support, and then we started the next cycle once more. And what I find interesting is we pretty much followed the same pattern from that first cycle, right? Because this was the first cycle. We bottom and then we start the second cycle. Once we started to bottom out of this support, we actually made this little consolidation right here. And this was right at our kind of final consolidation, I guess you could say, before we got that new all-time high move. And this is something that I've noticed every single one of our cycles. Right before we're about to get into that big move into price discovery, we usually make some type of consolidation that takes place on the RSI. And this is always taking place in the mid-range between the cycle low and the cycle high of our final cycles. So if we're looking at these, even in the 2017 cycle, you know, we made these two topping points, right? Technically, this second one was a higher high, but nonetheless, this is still pretty much following the same thing. Both of these ended up rejecting at the top of this resistance, and we ended up having our first real breakout out of new all-time highs, is also being the first time that we retested that. Pulled back, RSI came back up once again. We made a big new all-time high from 3K to 20K, yet the RSI barely even made, you know, a higher high. So this is what we're going to expect to see coming into our next cycle, guys. Whenever we're looking at our cycle top, I firmly believe that we're also going to be revisiting these same levels, because even in our last cycle, we saw the same thing. You know, regardless of this length of time that we spent from the high of 14K all the way back down to the low of 3.2 after the COVID capitulation, we got to remember that this was a little bit of a longer consolidation, but it's still being reciprocated the same ways on the RSI, where we bottom at the cycle low, same thing happens here. We make our first higher high, and then we kind of go through this consolidation. And this is kind of like your final sell-off, that final consolidation before we see that new all-time high type of a move. And this has happened every single one of our cycles up to this point. And I find it interesting that as we're getting ready for this current cycle, we've seen a lot of the same parallels, right? If we're looking at the way our cycle bottom took place, well, let's actually start with the cycle top, because this was a little bit different. Notice here at our cycle top, when Bitcoin peaked at 65K, even though we ended up making another new all-time high at 69.5 right here, the RSI was making a lower high, right? Our peak on the RSI actually took place at 65K. That was the Mania point in our cycle of the last bull run. So we saw that the RSI actually peaked over here at about 91, 92. And when we made that higher low and made another higher high, the RSI was actually making a lower high and a lower low. So what that showed is that there's a lot more weakness in this time. So there's always going to be a little bit of a variance, right? We didn't see the same type of price action in our last cycle that we saw with some of the other ones. All of the other two cycles, once they hit this RSI level being like 94, 95, what we ended up seeing was a short-term pullback and then another high that kind of came back and even tagged higher. You know, this cycle in our last bull run was the first time we never did that. Technically, this high should have came back up, tagged it for a second time before we started that bear market. So we have to be aware that the second that this cycle that we're in right now begins to come back up to this resistance of our channel, we got to be aware that we could be looking at either a cycle top or at least a local top of a very big move. And I think that that's the big thing we need to pay attention for with our current consolidation, because as it stands, everything has been very similar. You know, our cycle top was similar, although we ended up seeing a little bit of a difference in the RSI there between our secondary top. But when we ended up coming back down for our cycle low, we had the Terra Luna collapse here, and then we had the FTX collapse here. Both of these were just us retesting that same, you know, trend line. And so when we're looking at both of these, it's not that different from like the 2015 Bitcoin bottom where we made these two big capitulations. The only difference is this one actually made a small lower low in our last cycle. So there is a little bit of a difference, but not that much. You know, we're looking at a lot of the same parallels between the cycle top hitting the same resistance up here in the 90s, the cycle low coming all the way back down here and starting to bottom. The difference is the cycle lows themselves are actually getting more oversold every single time. And then the cycle tops are actually getting less and less parabolic. So we're seeing as Bitcoin gets more adoption, the parabolic cycles are slowly starting to phase out. And I wouldn't say that it's a huge difference because we're still seeing absolutely massive new all-time high moves. But it is something that we have to expect. The more money, the more volume, the more big players come in that are only looking to capitalize on holding the trend. You know, we're going to expect to see that these trends aren't going to be as volatile. But where we're at today, in my opinion, is no different than where we've been at in some of these prior cycles, right at that mid-range consolidation before we start to get that new all-time high move. And I do firmly believe that the price action that we're at right now is that final sell-off that we're going to see before we get that big breakout in the same ways that it was over in here in 2012, same ways in 2016, and the same ways in 2020. We're only seeing the same similarities in the structure. The patterns are all universally the same. The 4-year cycle is still strong. The only difference is we've made a bigger breakout quicker than any of the prior cycles. But the way that I'm looking at the RSI, some people are trying to call a top up here. Some people think it's just going to make this teeny tiny move and then we're done. You know, there's a lot of mixed opinions right now. But when I look at the RSI, I honestly think that we're right in that same trajectory as like 2016. You know, we're just about to get that breakout into price discovery before we start a much bigger move into that new all-time high. And that's most likely where it's going to be where we end up revisiting this main descending resistance. And the question is going to be this cycle, you know, what is that cycle top going to look like? Is it going to, in my opinion, we could see something more like this, right? or even in that 2017 cycle right here. I'm not going to be surprised to see something like this play out rather than our last cycle here. But all three of these are going to be really important for us to study, pay attention to, so that we can capitalize on any sort of shifts in momentum. Because in our 2013 cycle, we made our first big breakout into price discovery. Bitcoin went from $13 all the way to like $300, an absolutely massive move. We ended up coming all the way back up to tag that channel resistance, consolidated, and then we went for another new all-time high. We went from $66 all the way to $1,200, and we ended up revisiting that same trend before our top. I'm not going to be surprised if we see a big breakout into this next leg up into price discovery. Maybe we run up to like 150K or something. We see a pullback, and we ended up doing something similar. It's not impossible that we come all the way back up in this next breakout. We have a really big breakout into price discovery, fueled by the Ethereum ETFs, fueled by the Bitcoin ETF, fueled by retail adoption finally coming in. We're seeing a lot more awareness in the market than ever before. And with that, I'm not going to be surprised if we make a big run and actually come back up to test this level. But I'm not going to be surprised if our actual cycle top ends up being another kind of double top scenario like some of our prior cycles have played out, rather than the one that we saw in the last bull run where we peaked at 65K on the RSI. We ended up making another new all-time high, but it was significantly lower on the RSI. But if we end up, let's assume that we don't get that double top scenario. Let's assume that the peak on the RSI ends up, rallying similar to what the last cycle was. We could see that retest of the RSI level taking place in this next breakout. Maybe we run quickly up to 150K in one big move, and that's our retest. And we could easily see the same thing, where this thing just starts to sell off, make lower highs, and Bitcoin can still be making a higher high. We could be up at 200, 250,000, and we could see a lot of those same parallels. So we don't know for sure, but what I will say with confidence is that if we look to take some profit, once Bitcoin actually revisits this descending resistance, at that point, I think that we could be safe in assuming that this is a good time to take profit, that if you've been accumulating all the way back down in here at these low points, once this RSI level starts to get extended up into the 90s, that is where Bitcoin has, made a cycle top, or at the very least a local top. And I think that this is going to continue to play out from here. Now, guys, we're going to get into some other charts, and I want to talk a little bit more about the cycle, where we're at right now, the positioning, and why I think that we're so close to getting that new all-time high move. Now, what I've gone ahead and done is I've actually kind of overlaid this chart, and this is going to show you guys basically the psychology of a bubble, you could say. So I think it's important that we factor market cycles, because Bitcoin in and of itself follows these market cycles perfectly. The way that I've been able to make so much money in the market has just been understanding the way that these cycles work. You don't have to nail the exact top, you don't have to nail the exact bottom, but if you just understand the psychology of how these things work, I can guarantee you're going to be much more profitable than the average person inside of the market. And what I find really interesting, and where I actually believe that we're at as a whole for Bitcoin today, is actually inside of this first sell-off, inside of the institutional investor phase. Now, if you guys notice, the smart money, this is what's called the stealth phase. This is the beginning of the cycles. This is right where nobody really thinks anything's going to happen, and that's when the bottom of the bear market is, the highest maximum turmoil, fear is at the maximum point, there's just everybody freaking out, panic selling at losses. That is very much on par during this stealth phase, and that's where smart money positions. If you're looking at the bottom of the 4-year cycles, because every single 4 years, we know that we bottom perfectly to this pattern, right? If we pull up a date tool, you guys will see 1,428 days. Well, 36. Approximately where you draw this. 1,450 is 4 years. So the only way that, in my opinion, you're ever going to know when the stealth phase is to understand the 4-year cycles. But we've already left that. We've already maintained higher highs. We've entered this awareness phase. And if you guys notice, that's also where the institutions come in. So the institutional demand started here. This was when the ETF got approved. We made that first little sell-off right after, and then we saw that big breakout to the upside, and we've just been consolidating right around these prior all-time highs. This is exactly what you're going to see inside of your normal market cycle. The institutions come in, they create this first sell-off, and it's what's known as the bear trap, right? Because we know where this thing is headed. We know that this thing is going to go into a massive new all-time high. Anybody that disagrees with that is honestly just dumb and has just been delusional and ignoring data for the course of like 15 years, because we know that this thing is going to take off in a big way. When this thing takes off, a lot of people have begun capitulating right here, and especially around this Mt. Gox FUD that recently came out. Oh my gosh, Mt. Gox is going to liquidate $10 billion in Bitcoin on the market. Market sell, dump the whole thing to zero. Even though there's more money than that coming in through the ETF inflows all the time. So we're always going to see these shifting points take place in the market. We have a huge fundamental driver for people to be capitulating, for people to be bearish around these Mt. Gox unlocks. Yet at the exact same time, the Ethereum ETF is about to go live, and we're still seeing billions of dollars of new volume through the Bitcoin ETF. I really think that this is that final, or the first sell-off and that bear trap leaving the awareness phase. Because what have we noticed over the last couple months? Well, we've seen a lot of celebrities joining crypto. They've launched a lot of celebrity coins. 50 Cent was one, Jason Derulo. These are just two that I can think of off the top of my head that just recently rug pulled. And that's what you're seeing is all of these celebrities are coming in, they're launching these tokens, and then they're driving up the hype, and then they're liquidating all of their coins that they got in at the early portion and just rug pulling the whole chart. This is something that you're only going to see when you're exiting the awareness phase and you're getting into the mania phase, right? The mania. Institutions are not here to buy something and then never sell it and then just watch as everything collapses back around them. Institutions create the cycle. They drive the hype so that they can actually, take profit. The thing about the institutions is they're not going to be messing around, looking to just hold forever. And I know a lot of people have that belief that, oh my God, Bitcoin's the future. Institutions are here and they're going to buy it and they're going to own everything and they're just going to hold it forever. No, they're not. They're going to buy it all right now like what they have been doing. They're going to pump the crap out of it through their mainstream news buddies and all of their other rich friends that can go and make these nice media campaigns. And then we're going to see the most grandiose cycle top that the world has ever seen. It'll be the greatest bear market ever. And I really do think that that's what's coming in the next cycle. I'm not saying that we're going to distance ourselves from the 4-year cycle. I'm just saying that in this part of the cycle, we are getting ready for the most parabolic point. We can look at the history of Bitcoin and we can see that where we're at is that final shakeout before we get the new all-time high move. Historically speaking, this has been the most profitable point of the cycle. And the reason I'm even talking about this right now is because I do see so many people so shaken out, so fearful, talking about the unlocks, capitulating, looking for huge downside, when the facts of the matter point towards us actually having another big move coming very soon. Like I've stated, guys, this is just your typical Wyckoff accumulation. Bitcoin got the most oversold that it's been since all the way back here at 25K, and even at the cycle bottom. The RSI has not been that oversold in a significant period of time. And so for this to all be happening around the same time that the ETF for Ethereum is getting approved, around that same time that the institutions like BlackRock and all these other corporations started coming in and buying and accumulating billions of Bitcoin, now we're at the point where they're about to blow the absolute crap off of this, send it to new all-time highs, and that's where you're going to see the media attention. Because guys, I've maintained this belief since the entirety of this channel. Anytime the institutions are here, they are here because they want to realize a gain. How does an institutional investor realize any sort of profit when you're working with tens of billions of dollars in your portfolio? Well, you got to have exit liquidity. And the only way the institutions ever get exit liquidity is by media attention. They get their mainstream news outlets to go pump Bitcoin, go talk about Ethereum, go talk about Dogecoin, all of these silly things. Go talk about how it's the future, how we're all going to, adopt this. It'll be the global payment system, all of this stuff. And that's when you're starting to see this. And I think that we're just about to get to that point. The media attention's already kind of been there. This cycle has already gotten a lot more publicity, but I don't think that's anything close to what we're about to see. When we start to get into a new all-time high, the media is going to go absolutely ape crap. And that's when you're going to see retail start to come in. Coinbase will have downtime because there's so much overload on their systems and servers. You're going to start to see exchanges have the same issues. More and more people are going to flock to on-chain opportunities. Meme coins are going to blow up. On-chain altcoins, ERCs, RWAs, DeFi altcoins, NFTs, all of these things are going to take off in a big way. And we're going to see another one of these, just like what we saw in the last cycle. The only difference is we now have a new all-time high in the stock market. The economy is really strong. Jobs are up. Earnings are up. Everything that we need to see from our data as far as the economy goes is showing strength. And I do believe that we are at that point where we have the perfect combination of a strong economy, of a fundamental driver being the political race, people talking and pivoting towards being pro-crypto. Both Biden and Trump have kind of, Biden has ultimately passed the Ethereum ETF. They've kind of okayed some things that they were against. And the Trump administration has gone full bull with Bitcoin and crypto. They're saying, vote for me if you want good Bitcoin laws. This is something that's going to drive value into this cycle. And I do believe that we're at that last sell-off, the final bear trap that we're going to get. And we just finished the final Wyckoff of that bear trap before that next move comes. Now, the final chart we're going to look at here is the total altcoin market cap, because really the altcoin total market cap just looks exactly like the Wall Street cheat sheet. We're going to move this over here, and I'm going to just map out what I'm seeing right now. Now, obviously speaking, where we're at today, I believe, is this disbelief phase. And if you guys notice, the disbelief phase happens twice. We see it right here at the beginning of the cycle, and then we see it right here at the ending of the bear market. So once again, the beginning of the cycle. Disbelief in the cycle, well, in our last cycle would have been right here. Make that white. Because remember, we had this big breakout of our bear market bottom. We'd spent 700 days approximately consolidating inside of this range. Once we broke out of that and flipped it to support, that's where you get the disbelief phase. Everybody thinks it's a fake rally. It's never going to take off. Everybody that's buying is an idiot. And that's right before the cycle takes off. And this is what happens literally every single time. And so if we come over here, we can see a lot of the same similarities with our current cycle. The disbelief phase is once we've broken out of our bear market and actually started those first higher highs. So you could call this the disbelief phase right here, or you could call this the disbelief phase. I think that this entire thing is just that same move. There's not really a difference here. So when we're looking, the disbelief phase is right before we get the big breakout into our cycle. That's the exact same thing that happened in the last cycle. It's not coincidental that once we flipped that bear market bottom, got that disbelief phase, that's right before the real hype of the market cycle set in. I firmly believe that we're at the exact same moment of time. It's just a little bit different in the price action. Obviously, we're a little bit higher up here in price, but it's not that big of a difference. And this is what I think is going to be playing out, going into this next cycle, considering even the bear market bottom we had was also exactly the same. We're going to go through and make these red so it's easier to see. Cycle low, rejection, secondary retest, secondary rejection, and then we come for a final spring-loaded bounce. It was the same Wyckoff accumulation that takes place even in the last cycle. We did the same type of accumulation. Now, if you guys notice, the disbelief phase, this is a sucker's rally. It's only after we've broken out of the bear market and started that first higher high that everybody thinks that the market is over, that we're going lower, this thing is dead, have fun for a 50-year bear market that never goes anywhere but to zero. That's where most people's sentiment is right now. And I can't be more excited because, I've been through the crypto cycles. This is my third bull run. I've made enough money now that I don't even have to worry about what anybody else has to say when they disagree with things, because it's like, I see somebody disagreeing saying, oh man, this is bearish, we're about to reject and just fall for a massive move, never going into a new bull market. And I see that and I just laugh because everything that I know and everything I've ever learned points towards us having the beginning of this big, new cycle. Everything in the charts is lining up to that. The psychology of the cycle is lining up to that. The institutions are here. We have corporations that are buying Bitcoin, governments that are buying Bitcoin. What more do we need to prove to everybody that we're about to get that next big breakout? In the last cycle, we had almost nothing. We had a pandemic going against us. Nobody even knew what the heck was going to happen as a whole in the entire world. Nobody even knew if they were going to wake up and be alive tomorrow. So now where we're at, we don't have those same fears. We don't have those same uncertainties. We have a strong economy. And now we have institutional demand for the first time in Bitcoin history. I don't think it's coincidental that we're already seeing record-breaking volume inside of the Bitcoin ETF, and I think that's going to be something that happens across the board on any of the altcoins that end up getting an ETF approval from here. Ethereum's is about to go live in a week from now. I firmly believe that that's going to be a huge catalyst for value and adoption going over the next couple months, and this will be the final point where we have to buy that last sell-off, the first sell-off of the big trend, because I'm telling you guys right now, anybody that's positioned and prepared is going to make a lot of money. You just have to do your due diligence and be patient because there's really nothing more for us to do besides hold. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you did find value in this video, please do me a favor. hit that subscribe button. If you want to see anything I'm investing over this cycle as we're getting ready for this next big breakout, I'd love to have you guys inside of my private group. Links are in the description for you guys to go ahead and sign up on my website to get access. With that being said, I love you, I appreciate you, and I can't wait to see what the heck happens to all of your guys' portfolios going into this bull run. With that being said, I'll catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.